How's it going? And welcome to episode 181 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcherless Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter and on YouTube at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 80 grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hasting can be followed at Hasting Kevin. We got a great show for you lined up while we just count the days until until that final pitch is thrown, that final out is made, and we can add up all the stats and get those final tallies of what all those teams and all the standings look like. Kevin, how tight is it in your biggest leagues? Of course, I'm referencing at least your main event. We talked about a little bit last week. Still as tight as it was last time we talked.
Actually, on the surface, it's not as tight. I've dropped back a few points. However, it's really nothing has changed. The points are there. This last 2.5 weeks is going to definitely be stressful in a fun way, but stressful. Everything's pretty much the same as it was about a week ago. Just trying to, we have 2 FAABs to go. We have 17 days of the 2024 MLB regular season to go after tonight, and I think there might be a game or two still going, but for the most part, we have 17 days to go and 2 FAAB periods to make happen what we need to make happen.
and realizing that that's all you got. That's all you get. And then you can just, start drafting again. It's simple.
Yeah, exactly. I do enjoy the NFBC postseason contests that they put together. I've been doing that for a few years. That's a lot of fun, but it'd be really nice not to have to add money to the account to make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I will, of course, we'll echo. We say this every year. NFBC does a great job with those payouts happening as quickly as possible. So,
usually within a day or two after the season's over. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as there's well, last year I feel like there was like a couple of days because they had to worry about that Miami stat changes.
There was an update still coming. Exactly.
But so as of right now, knock on wood, we're not worried about that like we were then. And there's no like games that we're worried about whether or not they're going to be made up or not. We don't have any outstanding games that I've seen. So should be a nice clean. Now that I say that, of course, something will actually happen. But we'll deal with that 17 days from now. All right, but we do have a couple of news items that came up that should be in your consideration for this second to last FAAB period coming up. And the first, we're going to get a whole lot more information about these guys over the weekend. But the Texas Rangers have a whole bunch of new pitchers in their arsenal, pending that they all work out and none of them get re-injured or anything like that. They have added Kumar Rocker to their rotation, who's making his MLB debut as we speak. And by the time we're done recording, we'll have a better idea of how he fared in his first MLB game, where he's pitching in Seattle, which is a nice little landing spot on the surface, followed by Jacob deGrom returning to the rotation on Friday, and then Max Scherzer returning as well on Saturday. So, I mean, what are the odds that all three of these guys continue to make every fifth day starts for the Rangers here on out? And assuming that all three of these guys are available in your leagues, because, if deGrom wasn't drafted, he's now he'll be available. Scherzer was dropped in most places. And then obviously Rocker making his debut. How would you rank them as far as like who you're going after this FAAB period, assuming all three of them are available?
Oh, I think depending on what we see on Friday, as of right now, Thursday night, it's Jacob deGrom, and by a pretty wide margin. In fact, I don't think I have much interest in Max Scherzer at all, and that seems crazy. We can probably get a couple of starts out of him the rest of the way, the same as deGrom, but he just hasn't been, the same. over the past couple of seasons, even when healthy. And we don't get, unless he's rostered in 95% of leagues. I don't know. I could look real quick how much he was actually started this week. He started in 40% of main events. So those people get the at Seattle start out of Max Scherzer, which should be great with the strikeouts. But then we're looking at Toronto. Oh no, he would get Seattle again. DeGrom gets Toronto. Maybe I am more interested in Scherzer than I thought. I thought he was going to get Toronto. That's my mistake. Yeah, DeGrom getting Toronto next week. It does appear, and there are rumblings that Texas, with these additions, are going to stick with a 6-man rotation. Uh, and Cody Bradford remains with the team,
Right.
although he did have a rough outing. But it's really intriguing. Roster Resource does not have Kumar Rocker pitching for the Rangers again this season. They just have a 5-man rotation going without Kumar Rocker. I don't think the Rangers would bring up Kumar Rocker at all if they're not going to give him another couple of starts the rest of the way. I think Cody Bradford would either be sent down, who has been really good for most of his 2 appearances with the team this season, or they go 6-man and they're all here, which would mean only 2 starts for pretty much the entire rotation over the final 2 weeks, two apiece. So yeah, it's DeGrom who appears to line up with Toronto next week after it's such a shame. 80% of NFBC leagues out there, both 15s and 12s, 80% of NFBC leagues don't get to use Jacob DeGrom at Seattle on Friday.
I know that.
Such
I
a
mean,
shame.
that's the biggest shame of it all.
Yes, it's horrible. But I think it's DeGrom, and then probably Rocker ahead of Scherzer for me, in spite of my mistake. And he is getting Seattle next week. I think Rocker has been so good uh, in the minors as of late, and through 2 innings here on Thursday, 4 strikeouts, no runs, 2 hits so far, looking really good. So I think I would actually prefer him over Scherzer, which seems just ridiculous, but I think I would over the final 2 weeks. But DeGrom's the guy. I don't think he's going to get those 2 starts the final week of the season. I do
Sure.
think even if they do stick with a 5-man rotation, if it was at home, they might let DeGrom pitch that last day of the year, but it is on the road, so I really don't see it, but I you never know. At least you know you're probably getting the 1 start. So if he does, it's not a 0 or 4 or 5 inning game, right? That's a second start we're hoping for on the final day. So that does make it easier to use DeGrom each of the last 2 weeks of the season.
Just let DeGrom close out your season. Let him close out that game, that final game. Get the
Right.
save.
Well, they
Under his
wanna get him
belt.
some innings, right? They wanna see what he
Yeah,
can do,
exactly.
so I wouldn't be completely shocked if he does get 2 starts that final week. I just don't expect it, and even if he does get the second one, it might be an extra quick hook.
Yeah, and as far as Rocker goes, I agree. I can't imagine why they call him up, and it's not as though they have to watch his innings. You know, he obviously has all that injury concern since the day he was, signed and drafted and what have you. Only 28 innings last year at high A ball, in between the 3 levels that he pitched at in the minors this year, only at 36 and 2/3 innings. So, he's got plenty of innings left in the arm to finish out the season. And there's not going to be any minor league season for him to pitch in if they were to send him
Right.
back down. I don't, unless and I have to look this up, unless his AAA team is making the playoffs. I mean, the international league, at least, the last game is this Sunday, at least the last regular season game. And I know that because I will be going to the AAA Indianapolis game
Nice.
on Sunday. Would be nice because I had all these tickets that I had to use, and that was the last opportunity. And it happens to be my birthday, so it'll be a good way to use
Even
those
better.
tickets that were given to me for Christmas on my own birthday. So
Very
that'd
cool.
be fun. Yeah, so I expect to see Rocker at least make 1, if not 2 more starts. in Texas or for the Rangers before the end of the season. So I would expect anybody who's still got any money left will be going after all three of these guys if they are available. But like you said, Scherzer is rostered in most places already.
Yeah, because he was back fairly recently. He's
he
the
just
most
struggled so
rostered. He
hard.
wasn't dropping much.
I expected his rostership to have been lower just
Look,
because.
I did too.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree. I did too.
All right, now we'll head up to Minnesota. We got some returnees to the Minnesota lineup, or at least options for their lineup. Manuel Margot and Christian Vazquez returned the other day. And then as of today, on Thursday, even though they don't have a game, they have reinstated Byron Buxton, who had a little bit of a rehab snafu while he was reporting some pain still in his hip, but apparently it is at least good enough for him to tolerate it, for them to bring him back. In return, Austin Martin was optioned back down to AAA. So with Buxton's return, Margot and Christian Vazquez back in the mix, at least as bench options, how are you expecting the Minnesota lineup to shake out over the weekend and for the final 2 weeks of the season?
The same way it has all season. They're going to continue to play the matchups, which makes the first half of this coming week difficult. They do have a 7-game week. That's great. But 2 lefties and 2 righties in the first half. And there's a lot of teams with 7-game schedules, so we'll have a lot of players with at least 3 out of 4 in the favorable matchup when we're going to look at our lineups for this week. So that's going to make it tough for most of the Twins at the first half of the week. They do face, it appears, 3 righties for the weekend, which means no Manuel Margot for me. It's just like he's probably going to play twice this week is what I see. Most of the season he's pretty much only played versus left-handed starting pitching. So I don't see much there, unfortunately. Obviously, Buxton back is great for those rostering him. But yeah, Minnesota, like we've said all year, they are the matchup playing team out there right now, the one that plays them the most, even more than Tampa, San Francisco, some of the others. So when they have a first half of the week, 2 righties, 2 lefties, that makes it tough.
Yeah, the thing with Buxton, and I actually can appreciate Margot's situation more so because you can predict when he will be playing and when he won't be playing. Buxton, you can't. Like, there's no strict platoon. It's just like, hey, he needs a day of rest.
How's he feel?
How's you feeling today? We don't know. We're never going to find out until lineups are locked in. And so it's actually really frustrating and because they have 7 games, you can roll the dice and maybe he plays 3 out of 4 in the first half of the week. I actually worry more about the following weekend. It's like you miss 1 out of 3, it makes it more of a difference than 1 out of the first 4. There are a lot of teams, and we'll get to it later, that have 7 games this week. So that's not as much of interest to me this particular week, just because there are so many other options out there for a full 7-game slate.
Yeah, when I'm looking at Minnesota, I'm really trying to take advantage of the fact that they're, in spite of those 2 lefties they'll face the first half of the week, it is all righties over the weekend. So Trevor Larnach will definitely be appealing to me this week. It'll be up in the air and whether he gets started first half of the week with just the 2 righties. He doesn't sit against every lefty, so I'd still be interested in Trevor Larnach and Edward Julien leading off when he's in there against righties. The last 4 games he's played, and starting to pick it up a little bit. Still just the 1 home run since he's been recalled and no stolen bases. Early in the year, the only value he was providing, because he wasn't performing overall very well, was the stolen bases. But Edouard Julien is probably going to get some playing time this week, so it is in consideration. It's just a matter of whether or not you think he's going to produce, and especially he hasn't even attempted a stolen base since he came back in August, which is very disappointing to me because that's the little bit of value he did provide earlier in the year.
Yeah, and which he wasn't exactly, that wasn't his calling card, but it was nice to see
No.
that he could produce that, and then for it to
Yeah.
just completely disappear, you're like, oh, that stinks.
Yeah. Now he's giving us nothing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, another returnee here, which I just thought it was interesting because of what the conversation we had last week about the possibilities in Houston. Chas McCormick hits the IL for the Houston Astros, which I would assume may be one of the reasons Jason Hayward is still on the Astros. But is there any other change for Houston's lineup or options, especially in their outfield with McCormick not in the mix, at least probably basically for the rest of the season?
No, I don't think so. I agree with you that it may mean Hayward getting a little bit of playing time, rather than just being completely let go. And he hit a 2-run home run on Thursday, so the first game he's played in a week. So maybe that will be fine, but for the most part, it just solidifies Jake Myers. And like we talked last week, Ben Gamel's been playing versus righties. Um, at, over half of the time, but not a lot of interest here. For the most part, the Astros we want in our lineups are rostered.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we got a couple of pitchers hitting the IL. Let's get right into those. First and foremost, Reynaldo Lopez hit the IL after leaving his last start after the first inning and seeing the trainer with a shoulder issue. But good news is his MRI comes back clean. He is, though, of course, he was placed on the 15-day IL, which basically ends his season. Possibility he returns for one last start in the final weekend. Is that possibility enough to hold on to him? I can't imagine, but what says you?
Yeah, no, and I'm not sure what Atlanta's going to do yet. Roster Resource does have Ian Anderson penciled in for a start next week, but on Atlanta's page, they only have 4 starters listed.
Yeah.
They haven't moved him into the rotation. They have him there for a spot start. So this is tight, though. I don't know the update today. I know as of Wednesday, Atlanta and the New York Mets are tied for the final wild card spot. So this is a big deal. They're not going to choose to do anything that they don't believe is going to help them have the best chance to win that day. So I don't know in their minds, is that Ian Anderson or is that a bullpen day? Which one gives us a better chance to win? Probably depends on how much the bullpen gets used earlier in the week. If the bullpen's fresh, they might say, we don't need Ian Anderson, or go in expecting that he's definitely just more like an opener. Go out there, air it out. You will not see anybody a second time. So it's going to be kind of touch and go here, and I don't think I'd have much interest in Ian Anderson anyway. He's got almost a 1.5 whip in the minors this year. So yeah, I think we're rolling with the 4 starters that Atlanta has right now.
Yeah, Atlanta 1 game back from the Mets in that for that final wild card spot. So just as tight as
that's
anything.
Gonna be a fun couple weeks.
Yeah, I would say as tight as anything can possibly be. With definitely tighter than the American League, which has right now Detroit and Seattle, and we'll see if that changes with Seattle's outcome.
Come on, you can still say Boston's in there.
I can't. I don't think
they still got a fighting chance. They got a fighting chance.
They have not been mathematically eliminated. You are correct. Yes, I will. That's
it's too bad their offense slowed down. As good as they were for most of July and August, all of a sudden they're a different lineup. It's bad.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Depending on what happens, if Seattle loses their game, technically they'll be tied with Boston for second out, the second team out of the wild card spot. So yeah, you're right. They have a fighting chance. It just seems like they're not willing to fight for it. All right, the other pitcher that will be losing out of our rotations and their major league rotations is, speaking of Seattle, Luis Castillo. He has a grade 2 hamstring strain that ultimately ends his season. Seattle assuming that Seattle doesn't actually make the playoffs, which I think is a fair assumption at this point as well. So obviously easy drop on Castillo, but what does Seattle do with their rotation opening that he opens up for the rest of the way?
Well, we saw Emerson Hancock earlier in the season. Saw mixed results. We will see him on Friday at home versus Texas. And if he pitches all right in that, I have interest here, even though he's set to face the Yankees this week. It is in Seattle, which is, a nice ballpark, especially for pitchers facing right-handed hitting, which is the Yankees' most dangerous bats. It seems like are almost always right-handers. So if he looks good, um, and it's not really results. I want to see what he looks like on Friday. If he looks confident and he's locating and things look right for him versus Texas on Friday, I'd be interested in him versus the Yankees only because it's at home in Seattle on appears to be next Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, do you think that the Mariners do anything about the batter's eye at their home park for next year?
Dino Sarris said on Rates and Barrels this week that he has heard they are changing it.
Okay, all right. I mean that's a big thing. That's like building a wall in Baltimore. Like it's going to make a big difference.
Maybe tempering our expectations of the great rotation Seattle has going forward.
Exactly.
But I don't think a whole lot, but a little bit. But we got to keep that side of it in mind as well. It helps their pitching staff too.
Yeah, exactly. So, temper expectations moving into your early drafts, or throughout the summer season, because you're gonna want to know what they actually are doing to remedy that situation. Also, I think it is something to consider. Like this didn't happen in Seattle every year. Like this seemed like this was a newer problem. So keep an eye on what other teams are doing in their stadiums to change the way that their walls are placed, the heights, what their batter eyes look like, et cetera, et cetera. They can really make a big impact year to year, and those park factors can change pretty quickly, as we saw. Last pitcher here to hit the IL, it provides possible speculation. Ben Joyce, closer for the Angels, hit the IL with shoulder inflammation of his own. Is it worth speculating on a possible closer replacement for the Angels for the final 2 weeks of the season?
Probably not. However, Jason at Roster Resource, without Ben Joyce, has 5 closers listed. And Jose Suarez got the most recent one. It was not just the 9th inning. It was a 49 pitch save.
Yeah.
Hunter Strickland got the one prior to that. And I think if I was going to do something, if I really need saves, and fortunately or unfortunately, as it could be, I'm either good in saves or I'm so far back, there's nothing I can do about it. So there's not much I have to worry about in my leagues. But if I needed every little save I can get, I'd go with Hunter Strickland here. They have used him in this spot at times this season. And I think he would be the guy, especially for a manager like Ron Washington going forward when it's only for the final 2 weeks. If there was a little more time, maybe they'd try to season somebody and that they were looking forward to having the role next season. But if I have to pick one, and in some leagues you may be in the situation where you have to try to figure something out here, I'd go Hunter Strickland.
Well, Strickland was the guy when Estevez got traded, and before Washington was ready to put Joyce in the role. Strickland was the guy. Like Strickland got a couple of saves there, and when Washington said, Joyce we're not ready to put him in that role yet. Obviously, it was like a week later. He basically took it over.
105 miles an hour will do that.
Yeah,
they'll get you in the spot.
All right. Well, that's the news fit to talk about when you're considering your FAAB bids. So we'll get into actual recommendations right after this quick break. All right, we are back. Of course, you were listening to On the Wire. We only have 2 FAAB periods left in the entire season, which is nuts. But we just talked about a whole bunch of news items. There's still lots of news happening that can impact your decision making in your daily leagues and your weekly leagues. So to find out and make sure you're all caught up every single day, of course, you should be listening to the First Pitch podcast. Casey Bubba and Jay Crumpler got you covered every single day. They break down all the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games, as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your leagues down the stretch. Of course, Nick Pollock has you covered with the starting pitching on his Plus Pitch podcast every weekday. Check that out for recaps of all the starts that happened the day before, and then all of your streaming options for the next day or two, depending on what day you're listening. Let's get right into whatever FAAB dollars you have left, scrimping and saving, scraping the bottom of the barrel. As long as you got more than $1 left, you're going to be making some bids here. You can't take it with you, Kevin. I need some power. I need some home runs. I need some RBIs. Who's out there? Like I alluded to earlier, there's a lot of teams with 7 games. So there's going to be some bats that have some opportunities to hit some over the wall. Who are you looking at in that situation?
Yeah, with all those 7-game weeks for so many teams this week, I really thought there would be more available. I feel like I feel like power's been a little easier this season than in 2023. I know 2023 there was a lot of people we would hear talking throughout the season that just can't find power, just can't find power. And it's been up and down this season. Some weeks it's felt like there was all kinds of options, other weeks very few. And I felt like there was going to be quite a few options this week, but I've had a hard time finding any. However, one guy every week when I pull up my next week's projections, the guy that not rostered in the leagues I have that's available, that was always at the top for projected home runs, and the matchups just never worked out. It was like, no, I can't use him. They're facing right-handed pitching all week. But Patrick Corbin, excuse me, not Patrick Corbin. I said that because that's one of the pitchers he gets to face. Patrick Wisdom is once again at the top of the projections for available players in my leagues. He's, projected for 1.1 home runs for the week. And so many times this season, I didn't think he was going to get the at-bats he was projected for.
Right.
However, the Cubs are lined up to face 4 out of 7 left-handed starting pitchers this week. The best part is the weekend. It's 3 out of 3. So Patrick Wisdom will be on many of my rosters with the plan of using him Friday, Saturday, Sunday in NFBC formats. He's not rostered in 15s or 12s on the NFBC.
To see you get 3 straight against the same opponent as well, to see lefty, back to back to back in a rotation, no matter what time of year it is crazy. But it's nice you can kind of plan for that, especially when it hits on a weekend in those formats. So good looking out there, and the fact that he's available literally everywhere makes him worthy of throwing your money around if you've got it. All right, power, got your target there. Let's look for some speed out there on the waiver wire. In your FAAB list, stolen bases, runs scored. Kevin, who's out there? And the matchups don't matter as much here. It's just a matter of who's running and who's available.
Yeah, the first one cracks me up. I never thought I would be able to use him in this category. I mean, he's an amazing athlete. I just didn't think I'd ever use him in the speed category, not the power category. And that's Jesus Sanchez. And yes, he is universally rostered in 15s, but he's available in almost 30% of 12s. And over the past 2.5 scoring periods, he has 5 stolen bases. He had 2 2 scoring periods ago. He had 2 last week. He's got 1 already this week, and we still have the weekend to go. He's 8 out of 9 in the second half and stolen bases and getting on base at a 320 clip. So Jesus Sanchez with Miami facing 5 out of 6 right-handed pitchers this week. He'll get at least those 5 starts. And so he's been running when he has the opportunities. And then Jason Dominguez, we've talked a lot about him this season, and he's stealing bases already at the major league level. 83% rostered in 15s, but only 34% in 12s. And I think we're going to see him most days. Verdugo will still get in there. Both of them will be in the lineup at times, but I think we're going to see Dominguez most days. And at only 34% rostered in 12s, I think he's viable if you need speed in those 12-team leagues.
Yeah, of course. We speculated on when the Jason would be brought up, and of course he makes his debut.
They waited long enough because I wasn't paying close attention on Monday. So in the leagues I was stashing him, I didn't get him in. It hasn't hurt too bad.
Yeah,
I was like, come on, let us know. Give me a few hours.
They didn't give
I think it was like an hour before game time, right?
They didn't give the same kind of notice that the Nationals give for their top prospects.
At least give us somewhere in between.
Yeah, you don't need to give us 3 days, but maybe more than an hour. That would be great. But yeah, so of course he, made his debut this week. We left him out of the news section. I knew I saw his name on the list, so you might as well just bring him up in this category. But already plenty rostered, even though this is like the amount of stash that's been made for Dominguez is kind of nuts, right? To be stashing, I guess you didn't have to, because they could have been drafted, dropped, and then picked up a couple weeks ago and just stashed for a couple weeks. It's not like most people were stashing them all year long. So that's probably the situation that we find ourselves in most leagues, but still readily available in 12s and still in more than a handful of those 15s available Jason Dominguez. So
really quick, Uncle Ted has a nice question in the chat here. Where are we drafting Kerry Carpenter in 2025 for the Tigers? He'll be 28 years old, and it'll be his 4th major league season. He's going to end up with less than 300 plate appearances, but probably between 15 and 20 home runs after his 20 last season and 459 plate appearances, and with really good batting averages. RBI, Detroit should have a better team. Uncle Ted's onto something. Where would you draft Kerry Carpenter next season, Adam?
At this point, oh man, it's just a matter of I can't imagine that I can't imagine I'd be drafting him in my top 3, like as an OF3. But I would venture to guess, but depending on if you're in a 12 or 15, he's a pretty viable OF4 in most situations. I can't imagine drafting most outfielders from Detroit unless there's somebody that really, really, really stands out, I feel really confident about in my top 3 outfield spots at this point.
Yeah. I think this is a great question. Something we're going to have to dig more into in the offseason and leading up to next year. But I know many podcasts out there are looking ahead at 2025 at least a little bit now. Sure. And I thought that was a great question because when he's been healthy and in the lineup, he's been amazing.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how much do you trust that? Is it a Byron Buxton situation, or is it just, we're not sure what he can do throughout, a full season. Can he elaborate on this for an entire season? Of course, it's never safe to be like, well, if can you spread this out throughout the whole season, he'd be doing X, Y, and Z. But to that point, to your point, if he's showing us is production while he's playing, and the only thing holding it back is not playing, then one has to believe that it's in him to actually put that together. I'll also be curious to see what Detroit's outfield looks like next year. A lot of
Yeah.
moving parts in that
Healthy Riley Green. Yeah. Yeah, but Kerry Carpenter sure looks like if he can stay healthy for a whole season, that he's, a 275 plus batting average with a potential for 30 home runs. And there's not very many guys that can do that.
Yeah, and of course he's still pre-arbitration, so he's going to be in Detroit for quite some time. And especially with all these injuries, they're not too worried about their arbitration cases at this point, even with the production he's putting on the field.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're talking about Kerry Carpenter's opportunity for next year. Let's talk about opportunities we're going to see for just this coming week, Kevin. Of course, we alluded to the fact that there are a lot of teams, and I'm going to list them all off, that have 7 games. So listen carefully. Cleveland, Minnesota, Houston, the Angels, Atlanta, the Mets, Philadelphia, Washington, Cubs, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Arizona, and the Dodgers all have 7 games. It is something to note that there are no teams that have 7 games in the final week of the season. So this will be the final week where we do have this opportunity of getting all 7 games in one week. There are no teams that have just the 5. So everybody else has 6 going into the second to last week. But looking ahead at the final week of the season, Cleveland and Cincinnati will be the teams that have 5 games in the final week. Everybody else will have the 6 as well there. Everybody who has an off day is either off Monday or Thursday. No weird off days for the final 2 weeks of the season. Colorado, worth noting, for the rest of the season, they will be home for 3 versus Arizona and 3 at the Dodgers, and at home for their final 6 games of the season in the final week. 3 against the Cardinals and 3 against the Dodgers again. And then Cincinnati will be home for all 6 this week, with Atlanta and Pittsburgh visiting for 3 each. And they will be away from Cincinnati the final week for all 5 of their games, 2 in Cleveland and 3 in Chicago as they face off in Wrigley. So with all that in mind and all the other matchup plays and everything you've looked into, Kevin, who are you looking at the most for this week? If not this week only, then obviously possibly for the following week as well, for the final week, because you do have the scrimp and save, whatever FAAB you've got. Who's got a good matchup? Who's got a lot of games? Who's got a good opportunity ahead of themselves?
Yeah. So real quick, a big takeaway, and part of the reason I was looking at both of the final 2 weeks of the season schedules is, in leagues where we're setting weekly lineups or even daily lineups, the fact that Cincinnati only has 11 games remaining over the final 2 weeks and 14 teams have 13 games remaining. Yeah, two less when you're talking 13 to 11 may not seem like a lot, but it's a lot. So careful with those Cincinnati players, and counting on them for the final week is something that I got out of this. Cleveland, yes, has 5 games, but they have the 7 this week. That definitely helps. But then also, yes, be very careful with them at least the first half of the final week in FBC formats. And kind of coupling their 7-game week this week with 5 out of 7 appearing to be versus left-handed pitching. I like Harrison Bader this week, and I know he's been awful recently. I think he's hitting like 169 since the All-Star break, but he gets these lefties, and I looked at our PL Pro Process Plus rolling charts, and Harrison Bader, like everybody, up and down, and he's just started that turn from the bottom. Yes, he, like 3 days ago, was as bad as he has been all season long, but it started to turn. It does look like the bottom, and that's what's really hard to do. Catch somebody that's about to get hot before they even show any signs of it. And I really think with the 5 starts versus left-handed pitching this week, I think Harrison Bader could be in for a big week for the New York Mets. In fact, I hope so. Where I don't already roster him, I'm going to target him. So I hope he has a big week.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, just looking at the lineup charts here, the Mets have only faced 1 lefty starter all month.
Now,
And
for the season, his numbers look like he has reserve splits. We know that's not the case in small samples, right? It takes 1,000 plate appearances from both sides. Derek Carty would tell us that 1,000 times before he would listen to us talk about reverse splits. And for his career, he is much better versus lefties. That's part of what I'm taking into consideration here.
yeah, and you have to,
Yep.
especially in the smallest of samples. We're talking about 1 week that we're looking at, and if the fact that he can face off against 5 out of 7 lefties, you got to take those odds, especially if you're scrimping and saving and trying to figure out exactly how you can make the most out of this final week, if not the final 2 weeks. But we'll see what kind of matchups he faces in the final week. That's obviously have the 6 games in the final week, so still be plenty of opportunities there as well. All right, lots of a couple of hitting options out there. If you're trying to play the matchups, try to make the most of whatever categories you're chasing. Of course, you got to be chasing wins and Ks and ratios and all of that on the pitching side too. We'll get to those right after this break. All right, Kevin, as I said, we got plenty of hitters to consider there, but most of everybody's attention is going to be at these volume categories, all these matchups, these pitching, because you just really cannot. It's like predicting what's happening with pitching over the course of the final month is like the same as the first month. Like you just don't know how teams are going to use their pitchers. So you've got, whatever information you have, and you can scrape together to make your decisions, to be as confident as possible that you're going to at least get that Monday or Tuesday start as somebody. Cross your fingers that they make that can start at the end of the week. Who is out there that can help us volume our way to wins and strikeouts? Again, we can't guarantee that they're going to get 2 starts for the volume. So some of these guys you got to lean more on the single matchups that they might have, at least to start the week. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, and in 15s, we're looking like Uncle Ted brought it up last week or the week before, maybe both weeks, and we talk about it often. In 15s, we're looking at relievers if we need pitching right now. And
Right.
there's not much at all out there. There some the guys I like in 15s that are available have really tough matchups, and the guys that have decent matchups are all rostered. Uh, a couple of guys I did jot down that have very, very little availability in 15s, but some. So check. Couple of Baltimore pitchers. Albert Suarez actually gets a 2-step with a couple of nice matchups, both in Baltimore. First versus San Francisco, then versus Detroit. He's only available in a couple of 15s, but in about 38% of the 12-team RotoWire online championships. So in 12s, a decent shot that Albert Suarez is available for those nice matchups. His teammate Dean Kramer, similar rostership, but even more rostered in 12s. But I did put him on here because he does get San Francisco. We talked a little bit last week about Clark Schmidt. It does appear he's going to get a couple of starts here. He's 100% rostered in 15s, but only 70% rostered in 12s, and he's at Oakland. Oakland, a much better lineup than we anticipated coming into the year. That's not a gimme. It can blow up, but it's not somebody we're not hiding from that lineup, especially in that ballpark. So Clark Schmidt available. Another guy, only 12-team availability, Reed Detmers. And after the couple of starts he's had since he came back, we definitely want that White Sox start, even if it means we have to sweat the start at Houston. But after these last couple of starts, he's faced a couple of really good lineups, probably better than Houston. So maybe it works out even better than we think with just that White Sox start. I looked at some other guys, and they're, you know, I'll throw almost anybody in leagues where I not
Me too.
worried about my
Yep.
ratios any longer, or there's a nice gap, but it was just horrific matchups for anybody that was available I was looking at. So I think we're looking at relievers in 15s, but these guys all have some nice availability in 12s.
I think a lot of guys too that, I mean, I know for a fact, like there's a lot of guys out there that you would expect to be available that aren't available right now because of the matchups that they have this current week. I'm talking like Adam Aller, Patrick Corbin, Andrew Heaney. Like there's guys out there that you would
Also,
expect.
remember, I should have relisted him here. Like Jacob deGrom's available in 80% of leagues. We talked about him in the news and notes section. Max Scherzer's doesn't have as much availability in 15s, has some in 12s, and Kumar Rocker's available everywhere as of tomorrow morning. He'll be on the NFBC site in every league. So, of course, those guys, I'd put deGrom and Rocker at the top over every guy I listed here.
And just to update everybody, obviously everybody listening knows what his final line is going to be, but Rocker right now at 4 innings, 7 strikeouts, 2 walks, did give up a run, 3 hits. So not a bad, I mean, I expected.
Oh, it was a home run. Who hit it? Justin Turner.
Justin Turner, yeah. But I was expecting, look, the 7 strikeouts does not surprise me at all. Between what he's been doing in his last couple starts in AAA and then being in Seattle for this first start, not surprising at all. It's just a matter of whether or not he goes back out for the 5th and can add on to that and close it out with a double-digit strikeout debut. Then we'll see. He gets Seattle again next year, not in Seattle, in Texas this time, but still nice to maybe it gives Seattle a little bit of an edge because now they've seen more of his stuff and they can make adjustments and see if he can make adjustments back. But just remember, he is getting one of the better spots to start or to make his debut in as well. And that's got to be weighted a little bit as far as what you expect to see out of him.
And talent-wise, he's the best available.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah. And even though they're not in Seattle, it's still a good matchup to face the Mariners again as well. All right. Well, we got some volume to consider, but we need to chip away at the ratios here. As you said, we're typically looking at relievers anyway. We're definitely looking, if you are trying to just like tread water in ratios, you're probably not making the risky moves of most of these guys that you talked about. Of course, any one of them could cherry bomb in the cherry side of things and do you some good. But I think the risk of the bomb, if you are just trying to hold somebody off from those ratios, or you're just incrementally trying to make your, chip away at like just one spot up, who's a little bit of a safer bet out there, assuming that they get, enough innings next week to, make a dent.
Yeah. A guy we talked about quite often last season and really over the last couple of seasons, I think, Keegan Thompson for the Chicago Cubs. He got some starts over the past couple of years. There were times he looked really good as a starter in the rotation. He just got recalled at the end of August, and since being recalled, 6 appearances, 8 innings pitched, so he's not always only just getting an inning, has not given up a run at all, and less hits and walks than innings pitched, so a whip below 1, I believe. 3 hits, 4 walks in 8 innings pitched. The Cubs are set to face Oakland and Washington in a 7-game week. Both teams that, the lineups have been better than many expected this season. I know we were a little in on Washington being an improved lineup during last offseason. I don't know that anybody was in on Oakland doing what they've done, but there's still neither one of these teams are lineups we're running away from. A 7-game week after a weekend at Colorado. So it'll be nice for Chicago pitchers to get back home. But yeah, Keegan Thompson's been really good since rejoining the team 8 appearances ago.
There you go. Add them to the list again.
Exactly.
All right. And then, I mean, we're talking about relievers anyway, so we got to talk about saves. We mentioned Hunter Strickland as a desperate option in saves. Colorado did get back Victor Vodnik over this past week as well. For anybody who thought he might just jump right back into the role, however many save opportunities there might have been. Kinley seems to be continuing to keep that role tight to the vest, and getting way more saves than I expected anybody in Colorado to get leading up to that decision as well. So, something to consider there. I can't imagine why Colorado moves Kinley out of that spot for the rest of the season unless he completely falters. So if he's still available, I mean, you can do worse. You can go after Hunter Strickland. So I guess besides those two situations, Kevin, is there any other situation? I mean, we saw. I guess maybe it's worth mentioning what happened with Uceta this week, getting the suspension the initial suspension for throwing at Castellano was 3 days. He appealed it, got it cut down to 2, has already served that. So he'll be back on Friday. And did, before, letting up all those runs in that outing that led to the suspension, did get a nice save prior to that as well. But Tampa, that's like basically his only save since getting the role, which he still, technically doesn't have with Peter Van Brinks out. Any other situation out there besides those 3 that are worth, spending any of your small amount of dollars left?
Again, if you're just scrounging for any save you can find, yes, those 2 I think are the 2 best opportunities. I think Kinley keeps the job as well, and I agree. He's getting more save opportunities than we expected. And with Colorado having 9 home games out of 12 over the final 2 weeks, remember what we talked about, Kinley has performed better at Coors than on the road this year. So, and we would assume the Colorado lineup's going to score more runs at home, so maybe more opportunities continue. So that he's probably number 1 of who would be available, especially in 15s and probably most 12s as well. But the Yankees face the Royals this week for a 3-game series, so I watched 3 Yankees games. It appears last week we said we don't think we want to really mess with this too much. It really looked to me watching these games, even a game the Yankees blew the Royals out in, and another one that ended in extra innings, and one the Royals won. It really appears that Aaron Boone is setting that bullpen up to use Luke Weaver when he needs a save in the 9th inning, to me, when I'm watching them. So I think I would go ahead and grab Luke Weaver for the final 2 weeks if I do need saves. But with the caveat, I think before the postseason, they got Clay Holmes back in there. But I think Luke Weaver could get a couple more opportunities. Maybe just this first week, not the last week, something like that.
Sure. Hey, you gotta get him where you can, and even if it's just for one possible week. And it is official. Kumar Rocker is out of the game after 4 innings, 74 pitches. So I get it. It's
pretty good. Yeah.
Game is tied, so it's not like he's like not going to get the win or anything like that. So good all around start for him, and should set him up for at least a 5 inning if he can be a little bit more efficient in his in his second start. So obviously you all know that by now, listening to this a couple days after our recording. All right, Kevin, there's only 2 weeks left. I mean, I guess my pick, the wild card pick here, would just be Rocker. Either Rocker,
I think so, yeah.
or Dominguez.
There you go. Yeah.
There you go. I mean, I can't imagine we get like a surprise call up, but it is possible. I keep saying this, like with the AAA season about to end, and if there is a guy out there that just needs extra playing time, especially on a poor team, there could be a situation there that we happen, but that might not happen until Monday, which means you're only going to be bidding on them for the final week of the season as well.
Right.
All right. Well, Kevin, there's, again, most people out there probably have single-digit dollars left in FAAB to spend in these last 2 bids. Give us something that, can help us feel a little bit better about the way we spend our money in these last 2 bids.
I think if I am in that position and there's players I'm interested in this week, I do whatever I can to get them. Maybe save $1 just in case I have an injury for the final week. But I think now that we're down to only 2 weeks, it's play for now and not worry as much about the final week. If we when we're in that tough of a spot, right? Leagues I'm in where guys were down to $1 or $2, they spent it last week, right? They're gambling.
I
We
agree.
gotta
Yep.
stay healthy for 3 weeks, right? But it makes sense because there's not a whole lot of time to speculate or stash or any of that. So I think we're playing for now, uh, um, and in the ideal circumstances, saving a little bit for that final week. I think it's gonna be. I think prepare this week if you have Cleveland and Cincinnati players. Try to take care of that this week so you're not worrying about it next week when everybody realizes, ooh, I got a 2-game week here. What am I going to do? Try to take care of it. There's everybody has a 6-game week that final week, so it's not going to be horrible if you only get 2 games and other players are getting 3. But if they're platoon guys and Cincinnati or Cleveland, actually, I should have looked at this. If they're facing a righty and a lefty in those 2 games for the first half of the final week, there's almost nobody on either one of those teams outside of Jose Ramirez
Right.
that I'm playing. That includes Eddie De La Cruz, right?
Yeah.
So look ahead. Look at both weeks. That's why we filled out the schedule the way we did this week. Look at both weeks and decide what to do with your money this week. And hopefully you still have some left for the final week, but I'd spend it this week if I had to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in total agreement. Like, save the dollar for break glass in case of emergency. But basically, spend your money as if this was the final FAAB period and just plan for 2 weeks rather than just one. I like it. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to what we can possibly talk about with only one FAAB period left. But we'll see where everybody kind of stands in the standings and all that. And
next week's when we're dropping our entire bullpen. Right? Maybe save one guy in case something happens between Sunday night and Monday when we set our lineups. But next week we're making a lot of pickups. That's the other thing to take into consideration. When you're spending your money this week, maybe you don't just want $1 left. Maybe you need 3 or 4 because you're going to drop pitchers next week if you can, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's always fun, especially
so much to keep track of.
It's so much fun to just watch the kind of players that get dropped in all different formats. In my head-to-head playoffs, I'm in the finals in one because that's just the way that it was formatted. And you're dropping guys like Imanaga and you're dropping Yamamoto, even though he just came back, but he's not going to pitch again until next week. So it's like I got no use for somebody like that on my roster. Goodbye. And I mean, it's the same mentality. It's like if you're going to drop them this week, sure, they might be available for somebody to pick up next week if they have any money left. But next week it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to be able to get them. So it's like you're not hurting anybody but yourself by holding on to them.
On that note, we've talked about this a couple times. The leagues where I have closers benched because I don't need the saves, but I don't want other people getting them. I'm probably okay in most situations dropping them this week. I'd look at the save category, but like I know in a couple of my leagues, the guys I'm worried about adding saves to their roster don't have any money left, so I can drop the closers. Right
there you go. See, but these are the things you have to track. These are the things you have to, especially if it's any kind of a tight race for yourself or for your league in general. Lots of things to consider. All right. After all that is going to wrap it up for episode 181 of On the Wire. I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.